Hello and welcome to the second episode of my road to A-Class. This week, or last week rather, we were at Donington Park, again still with the Mazda MX-5s as I'm still in D-Class. The start of this race was kind of weird because the guy that actually qualified on pole is alongside me, whereas the guy that I think was in second place has actually jumped the start, and he's the blue Mazda up ahead. Now I'm still pretty new to iRacing, so I don't really understand how the blue Mazdas got away with it, but that's something for another time. Now this race actually turned out to be really quite eventful because, as you can see up ahead, the leaders didn't give the GR86s space. Now if you don't know, the MX-5s are a little bit slower than the GR86s, but because some drivers that drive in the Toyota class, the GR86 class, they're not really that quick, or maybe not really well practiced, and as a result the quicker guys in the Mazdas are able to catch up with them, especially if they make mistakes. Now speaking of mistakes, I was a bit slow coming off of that right-hander, which allows the black Mazda behind me, driven by Danny, to get a run and make a move. Now I knew from the start of this race you can't really see it because I've only just figured out how to record my overlays, so you can't really see how Danny is ranked against the rest of the field. Now this guy does have a higher I rating than the rest of the Mazda field, and I knew that if I wanted to win this race I'd need to be ahead of him. Not to spoil anything, but he's the reason this race got so intense, because we are going to have to get through traffic, and it's going to be a big advantage if you can navigate traffic as quickly as possible. Also, a bit of a side note, at the time of this race I was just under 2k I rating and had to finish, I think, either in the top 4 or the top 3 to get just over the line and get into 2k territory. And though it's not really what I'm trying to achieve at the moment, it's hard to not get carried away and do everything that I can to hit this milestone. But coming to the end of the final lap, one of the guys I had, I think, in the train breaks a little bit early, so I had to take avoiding action, which turned into an unintentional attempt of a move. Now it's always going to be hard to pass around the outside here, but though it wasn't my intention, if I got a position from it, I wouldn't have complained. But we didn't get a good run in the end, just like last week, and now it's back into single file. SP2 up ahead makes an attempt to overtake one of those slow Toyotas that I mentioned earlier. Now this is where the race starts to get interesting, because we're clearly quicker than the Toyota up ahead, and we're also fighting for position. There's also a train of cars behind me, so I need to not make any major mistakes, which is quite hard on this track because Donington is winding with a lot of elevation changes as well, and in this car you're only really relying on mechanical grip. It doesn't have any wings whatsoever, it's light, and on cold tires you can easily light up the rear wheels, as it's rear wheel drive as well. So I got a snap of oversteer coming down the hill, the right-hander, and this Mazda behind gets a run and perhaps misjudges his braking point, and he makes slight contact with me, resulting in a 0x and him unfortunately losing control. And just as that was happening, the guy in P2 manages to get past the Toyota, which signals to me that I need to get a move on. You might have been able to hear me complaining over voice chat that I got 2 incidence points for nothing. Now the incidence points, I think in a race you can get a maximum of 17 and then you get disqualified, and going off track gives you 1 incidence point. Contact can give you a scene from the incident that just happened, 2 incidence points, up to 4 incidence points I believe, which is the max that you can get from a bit of contact. It's important to try and keep your incidence points as low as possible, because I think if you get around 8 or 9 incidence points on a medium-sized track, you start to get negative safety rating, and at the end of the race, if your safety rating is negative, it'll take away from your current overall safety rating. Now coming out of the final corner, I get a run on Danny. All the meanwhile he's attacking the GR86 as we go down the main straight. Now I don't really think he's defending here, I think he's having a look and attempting to go for an overtake, and unintentionally I follow him through because the Toyota gets maybe unsighted or a bit distracted by Danny's initial move, allowing me to kind of stick my nose in there and go for a move. Now we do make contact, which results in a 0x, meaning that I don't have any incidence points. So I suppose the move is clean enough and I can now look ahead. We see another slow moving Toyota, so we follow Danny through because, like I said before, it's really important that he doesn't get away. And he's also, as you can see, having a bit of a go at the Toyota in front. Now I don't think I'm in the right position to follow him through this time because this section of the track, there's only really one quick line through it, and you have to go single file. And all the meantime, Danny's getting away. You can see I'm, at least in this part of the track, quicker than the Toyota ahead, but I'm just being held up on the relative board with the lap timings. You can see that when we crossed the line, Danny was a tenth of a second ahead, at the end of the lap, we'll see how far ahead he is, because I'm just getting caught in traffic at the wrong time. And coming down to this hairpin, I've noticed that it's a bit of a bottleneck because there's only one line through the hairpin really. I don't think I've ever went for a move in this section of track because it's just so tight. But as you can see, we got a run on the Toyota ahead, going down to the hairpin, and visually, I mean, Danny's kind of off into the distance a little bit. He's probably like a second or two at this point. We'll find out when we cross the line, but we go for the move down the inside of the Toyota, and now I can set my sights on the number one threat of me winning this race. I knew he was a threat because of his I rating. Now, I rating isn't necessarily a one-to-one indicator of how good a person is, especially with a specific car and track combination, but given that his I rating was higher than the rest of the field, and significantly so, I believed he was a threat. Now, as you can see, he's just over a second ahead of us. Not as bad as I feared. And we crossed the line with a 148. Now, in my previous races, in clear air, I was able to do 145s, especially low 145s as well. So hearing that the leader is, or rather, the fastest lap of the race is a 146, this reassured me that I potentially had the pace, at the very least, to be P2. But then I crossed the line on the very next lap with a 144.8. Now at this point of the week, I'd never done a sub 145 lap time, not even once. So this 44.8 was it was a surprise to me, let's say that. By the end of the next lap, we caught up to the two leaders, and Danny, as ever, was having a look, making his presence felt, and coming around the final corner, I could see that there is a bunch of cars up ahead, potential traffic, and in it was a Mustang that really shouldn't be there. That car is like, I think I've seen 3 seconds a lap faster depending on the driver, and I just don't think that this Mustang really knew the track and or car combination, and that's why he was pretty slow. And later on in that same lap, guess what? Down the hill, after the right-hander, Danny's getting busy and carving his way through the traffic, while I'm a little bit hesitant to follow him just because it could be a bit dangerous. And like I said, through this section, it's really tricky to line up a pass. As you can see, I kind of attempt to stick my nose in there, but get a snap of oversteer as I got a bit more aggressive on the brakes when I saw that the car ahead was turning in. This loses me a chunk of time, and to make matters worse, towards the end of that same lap, Danny makes a move for the lead at the hairpin. The guy's been pretty clinical all race, and at this point I've got some catching up to do. So on the very next lap, in what I think is the second sector, the two cars ahead start battling for position, and this grants me an opportunity because, as I've mentioned, there's only really one line through this next piece of track, and it's pretty dangerous to try and make a move. So they both make contact, one of them gets out of shape, loses a lot of momentum, and that allows me to slip through on the outside, where I just get a track limit warning because I was trying to give the car on the inside as much space as possible, and clearly I went too far. But we tuck into the slipstream of the Mazda ahead, and because he's quite close and we're going into this chicane where people have different levels of commitment, I decide to ease off the accelerator a little bit to give the guy ahead some room, because I'm being cautious and I'm not too massively confident with racing close at the moment. This causes me to lose exit speed, giving the car ahead that I just passed an opportunity to close up and potentially go for a move. So to defend, I go in the middle of the track. I accidentally outbrake the guy who was probably distracted by this Mustang that should be at least 2 or 3 seconds a lap quicker than us, giving me an opportunity to get up into P2 and try and clear the traffic that's ahead of me, starting with this Mustang. Just to give you an idea of how quicker on the straights this car is than the Mazda, in the middle sector, on the straight, I was able to almost pull alongside him. But look at the gap that he's able to pull in a straight line, which I then reel him back in when the corners come around. So if I'm to make a pass, I need to get him with a mistake and pull a gap in the corners, or else he's just going to catch me back up on the straight. So at the start of the next lap, when the Mustang makes a mistake into turn 1, I'm able to draw alongside him and pass him before the twisty bits at the end of sector 1, so he isn't able to use his straight line speed to get ahead of me. And then in the middle sector, where all the corners are, I'm able to solidify my position and then focus on the cars ahead. About 2 or 3 laps later, one of the two Toyotas between me and Danny makes a mistake after I catch up with him, allowing me pass, and then him and our Mustang behind get into a bit of an altercation, and now we have one more job to do before I can focus on Danny before the race finishes. After catching up to the Toyota, he makes a mistake going into the hairpin, allowing me pass, and now it's a race to the finish with the guy in P1. Dang. Who is currently 4 seconds ahead, and we've got 3 laps to go. Now it turns out that even with the traffic on the last lap, because I was within 7/10 of my session's best, I was able to close the gap from 4 seconds to 2.8. So maybe he made a mistake, but this gives some kind of a confidence boost and motivation that potentially I could catch him if I put enough pressure on before the end of the race. And crossing the line on the final lap, you can see the gap shrunk to 1.9 seconds, which means that we have a significant pace advantage over him, closing in by a second a lap. And it just goes to show that if you're able to get through traffic without losing a lot of time, you can really build a buffer even though the guy behind you might be quicker than you. But in an attempt to close the gap, you can see I'm a 10th up on my personal best, which no one else in this session has been able to match, so that's definitely a good sign. We're going through the right-hander around about the end of sector 1. I get a bit too greedy, put 2 wheels on the grass, and lose a chunk of time in the next windy section coming up. I managed to keep it tidy enough through the next section, but the gap doesn't seem to be shrinking. And the realization of the fact that I might just need to consolidate and be satisfied with P2 starts to sink in. But this race for me has been really fun and exciting, and for me reiterates just how good iRacing is, especially at the lower levels with multi-class racing, and especially in the Mazda MX-5. This car is such a good car to learn to drive, and you can oftentimes get really good racing when people are sensible. But coming out the final corner, I wasn't able to close the gap and fight for P1. Maybe I'll have better luck next time. I'll let my interaction with Danny play out, but that's all from me, and I'll see you next time.
If there'd been slightly less traffic, that would have been spicy.
Alright, didn't take a flag.
You know,
That's right job. You did really well.
catching up, and I'm like, man, he's catching up to me so fast.
Dude, I've never done a 4-8 in my life. So you pushed me there. Good stuff, man. You did really good to get through traffic as well.
Yeah, traffic was crazy up here.
That Mustang. You know, I'm new to iRacing, really enjoying it. Good racing, man.
You're doing really well.
Thanks. I mean, I'm not new to sim racing.
You gotta watch out for Danny and Monster.
Hey.
Yeah, that was really fun. Good stuff, guys. Good stuff.